My name is Haja McGee. I'm here representing not just myself, but my husband, who is now at MCI Norfolk, serving a life without parole sentence um, for a false conviction. So I'm right now waiting on a person himself to call in because I could tell his story, but it's better to come from him because he could tell you that tragedy, that trauma, when his life was taken away from him at 19 years old. He's now 38, and today marks his 20th anniversary from the time he left the streets of Boston.
On behalf of the McGee family, I appreciate all in attendance for extending their receptive ears to me in the here and now. Understand that change without begins with the change within. The very instrument that could legitimately alter our circumstances is, of course, our minds. So what happens when our minds are preoccupied with processing our unfortunate societal norms such as systemic racism, joblessness, gun violence, institutional disenfranchisement, absentee fathers, mass incarceration, etc. We are being asked to thrive in conditions that are designed to break our will and sense of determination. So how will we succeed? Allow me to paint a clear picture for you utilizing my own life as a narrative. Growing up, my father was like a deity to me. I truly worshiped him, and everything that came out of his mouth had a value greater than gold. When I was 8 to 9 years old, my father was dealing with an apparent addiction, so much so that my mother had kicked him out of the house. This dramatically impacted my self-esteem, being that I felt like nothing because in my mind he had chosen drugs over me. Because my father was my main source of motivation, it was hard for anyone to take his place. My mother was a good parent who tried, but her love never felt the same as his. And growing up in a household for the girls, I sought my identity in the streets with other young men. We each had sadly felt that all we had was each other and that nothing could get in the way of us living life on our terms. This is when I started doing whatever I needed to do in order to maintain my brotherhood. Thus, the code of the streets was adopted. I was a talented teenager. I played basketball incredibly well, and I was given a recording contract at 16 to rap. But little after my 17th birthday, when I was just a junior in Madison Park High School, just a few blocks away, I had made the worst decision in my life and had brought a gun into my home. And my little sister was accidentally shot with it by one of her friends, and it had almost taken her life. Being that I had not known how to process the impact of an accident, one that I blame myself for, I started using drugs and alcohol a few times a day to suppress the shame I felt. I started getting arrested and was soon the youngest person detained at South Bay Jail at 17 in 1995 for the gun used in my sister's accident. In 1997, I was a 19-year-old charged with the death of a store clerk at a neighborhood Christie's market. And although the evidence had clearly shown my innocence, I was sentenced to a life sentence at the age of 20. It was told to me that in order to go somewhere that you have never been, you must become someone that you never was. And I began challenging myself to challenge the systems that I felt falsely imprisoned me. But I could not do this until I truly understood it. Not only did I study the criminal justice system, I began to study multiple social systems as well, and soon had seen my life in a broader historical context. I felt like I was a fool to get sucked into the streets. But at that time, it was hard to focus on anything outside of the day. And in addition to that, it was taught to us on the corner that tomorrow was never promised anyway, so why invest time thinking about it? For the last 19 years of my life, I have not only been fighting to regain my freedom, but most importantly, my humanity. I witnessed a lot of trauma and experienced a lot of hurt. Yet, I was never introduced to anyone, whether counselors or psychiatric professionals, who could explain to me why my life felt so empty, yet so meaningless. But at 20 years old, I realized that my life would only be what I had willed it to become. So I had started changing my thinking about my potential beyond my past. Be mindful that I had to do this in an environment that discourages self-empowerment and self-expression. But through it all, I have elevated in conditions that attempted to breed standardized mediocrity in me. And what I discovered through this journey is that there are many prisons, but most of them are internal. in the forms of low self-esteem, insecurity, misplaced identity, which all prevent one from living a liberated life, to being one who has decided to be the architect of their tomorrow rather than being one who simply reacts to the day. As I have said earlier, change without begins with the change within. And what this means is that our situation will never change until we do, until we effectively vessel our justified frustrations into the mediums that could foster the needed solutions. I firmly believe that you're only as young as your ideas, which translates into new visions for old problems. If you're a teenager with old solutions, what changes are you logically expecting to see? It is only when you dare to be different that your conditions will soon animate the impression seen within your mind's eye. It was once stated by George Jackson, a prison abolitionist who had died in the early 70s, that life without control over the factors which determine the quality of my tranquility is of the first of importance to me. For without this control, I'm forever insecure, forever at the whim and caprice of the man in control. So it's okay to feel a certain way about what's going on in your community and what's taking place in society. Just as that young sister who live streamed her boyfriend getting shot in Minnesota just a few days ago. But understand that you should never become so overwhelmed by the problems that you miss out on the opportunity to discover its existing solution. Your life will only be what it is until you have changed it or those with similar passions and commitments do. And as everyone here this evening realizes, we must put forward a greater effort to identify our commonalities rather than magnify our differences, being that all we have is each other in this struggle for human decency in our homes, in our community, and in this country. This is not about race. It's about pace. Getting with those who are desirous about dealing with the issue now through effective networking and strategic alliance building. Throughout everything I've been through, I was told for the first time in my life that I'm deserving of happiness. And my wife had told me this. So this is what I now extend to you, that regardless of what you've been through, you too are deserving of happiness. And lastly, understand that the entire world will doubt you. But it is only until you doubt yourself that this becomes a reality. So take care of yourself, and thank you for offering me some time. Peace.